My son Raymond called me on a Thursday afternoon in March and told me, in the careful voice he uses when he is delivering someone else's message, that I would not be joining the family vacation this summer. "Mama," he said, "it's going to be a different kind of trip this year. Vanessa's parents are coming, and they're bringing some of their friends from the club, and it's going to be a certain kind of crowd, and Vanessa feels like maybe you'd be more comfortable." I let him find the end of that sentence on his own. He couldn't find it, so I helped him. "She feels like I wouldn't fit in," I said. A pause, long enough to tell me everything. "Mama, it's not like that." "Raymond," he went quiet. "I understand," I said. "Thank you for calling to let me know." And I hung up the phone and sat in my reading chair for a long time without moving. Outside my window, the Bradford pear tree in the front yard was just beginning to bloom, white blossoms coming in early, the way they sometimes do in Birmingham when March decides to be kind. Earl had planted that tree the year we moved into this house. He had driven 45 minutes to a nursery, chosen the tree himself, dug the hole himself, and stood back afterward with his hands on his hips and said, "Dot, that tree is going to outlive both of us and still be beautiful." He had been right about the tree. I sat looking at it for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called my sister Bet. She answered on the second ring the way she always does, like she was already expecting me. "What happened?" she said, because she knows my silences the way only a sister can. "Vanessa doesn't want me on the family vacation," I said. "Raymond just called. She says I wouldn't fit in." The silence on Bet's end had weight to it. "Where are they going?" she said finally. "Turks and Caicos," I said. "Some resort." Another silence. Then Bet said, very quietly, "Dorothy May Collins. Do you still have Margaret's number?" Margaret was my financial advisor. I looked out at Earl's tree. "I do," I said. "Then," Bet said, "I think you ought to give her a call." Before I tell you what I decided and what I did, I need you to understand something about my life. Because this story is not really about a vacation. It is about a woman who spent years making herself smaller than she was so that other people could feel comfortable. And the morning she decided to stop. I was born Dorothy May Washington in Bessemer, Alabama in 1957, third of 5 children. My mother worked as a seamstress, and my father drove a city bus, and together they raised us in a 3-bedroom house where there was never quite enough of anything except love, which they gave us in such abundance that I never once felt poor, even when we were. I became a teacher because my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Octavia Simmons, told me I had a mind worth developing, and I believed her with my whole heart. I taught English for 12 years at Jefferson Davis High School. The name was changed later. Thank God. And then I became an assistant principal and then a principal, and I ran that school for 23 years until I retired in 2019 with a ceremony in the gymnasium and 300 students past and present who came back to say goodbye. I met Earl Collins at a church picnic in 1981. He was a quiet man with large hands and a slow smile and the particular quality of stillness that some men have. The kind that makes you feel like, when they look at you, they are actually seeing you. He worked in construction management, built things for a living, and he had, from the time we married until the day he died, one consistent message for me that he delivered in words and in action every single day of our lives together. "Dorothy, you are nobody's afterthought. We were not rich, Earl and I, but we were deliberate." Earl had read every book he could find about building wealth, and he applied what he read with the same careful patience he brought to everything else. We maxed our retirement accounts every year from 1985 onward. We bought rental properties, 2 small houses in the Smithfield neighborhood, then a 3rd in Eastlake. We lived below our means consistently and without complaint because we understood that what we were building was not for right now. It was for later. When Earl died of a heart attack in 2019, 5 years ago, 4 months after I retired, as if he had waited to see me safely through the door before leaving, he left me an $800,000 life insurance policy, a portfolio that our financial advisor Margaret had been growing for 15 years, 3 rental properties that produced monthly income, and the fully paid house where his Bradford pear tree still bloomed white every March. I have never told Vanessa any of this. I have never told her because she never asked. She had decided, somewhere in the early years of her marriage to Raymond, exactly who I was. And who I was, in her estimation, was a country woman from Birmingham with simple tastes and a small life who was tolerated at holidays and managed at family gatherings. Vanessa Whitfield Collins came from what old Atlanta calls good family, which means her grandfather had made money in insurance before integration, and her parents had leveraged that into a certain stratum of Atlanta Black society, where the right last name and the right club membership and the right vacation destinations communicated something important about who you were. She was not cruel, not openly. She was something more sophisticated than cruel. She was managing. She managed me the way you manage something you find mildly embarrassing, with practiced pleasantness and careful distance. I had watched her do it for 13 years. She had never once asked me what I had done for a living. She knew I had been a principal. Raymond had told her that, but she had never asked about the school, never asked what the work meant to me, never shown a single flicker of curiosity about the decades I had spent shaping young people's lives in a city she considered beneath her. She called me Miss Dorothy. Not because she respected the formality, because it kept a distance she found useful. She did not include me in conversations about restaurants she'd visited or trips she'd taken, because she had decided those topics were outside my frame of reference. She selected gifts for the grandchildren on behalf of both of us, from Raymond and Vanessa and Grandma Dorothy, because she did not trust my taste. She hosted every holiday at her home in Atlanta because she found reasons, every year, why Birmingham was inconvenient. And now she had told my son, who had grown in my body and been raised by my hands and sent into the world with my values, that his mother would not fit in with her people at a resort in Turks and Caicos. I sat in my reading chair and I looked at Earl's tree. And I thought, Earl, what would you say right now? I knew exactly what he would say. He would say, book the trip. I called Margaret the next morning. Margaret Okafor had been my financial advisor for 18 years. She was a Nigerian-American woman in her early 50s who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and spoke about money with the calm precision of someone who had never been intimidated by numbers in her life. She had taken the portfolio Earl and I had been building and grown it, carefully and consistently, into something that still made me pause when she sent the quarterly statements. I told her I wanted to access some funds. She asked what for. I told her I was taking a vacation. She said, Good. You haven't taken one in 2 years. How much do you need? I told her the resort. I told her the dates. I told her what I was thinking about booking. There was a brief pause. Then Margaret said, Dorothy, book it. I want to tell you about the Grace Bay Club in Turks and Caicos because I had not known about this place before Raymond's phone call, and I spent that Thursday evening and all of Friday morning learning everything about it. It sits on Grace Bay Beach, which has been called one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, and I do not think that is an overstatement. The water is a color that does not look like it belongs to the real world. The sand is powder fine and white. The resort is intimate and elegant in the way that the finest places are elegant. Not loud about it, not performing, just completely, quietly exceptional. Vanessa had booked for her party. Raymond, herself, the children, her parents, James and Lorraine Whitfield, and 4 other couples from their Atlanta social circle, a collection of villas and junior suites. I found this out because Raymond, not thinking, had mentioned the name of the resort and the approximate dates when he'd called. I booked the Ammon Suite. It was the finest accommodation on the property. Private plunge pool, butler service, direct beach access, ocean views from every room, a terrace large enough to host a dinner party. It cost more per night than some people spend on a car payment. I booked it for 8 nights. I did not call Raymond. I did not tell Vanessa. I did not mention it to anyone except Bet, who, when I told her the suite price, said nothing for a full 4 seconds and then said, Earl would be so happy right now. I cried a little when she said that, just briefly. Then I dried my eyes and started thinking about what to pack. Now, I want to be clear about something because I think it matters. I was not packing to perform. I was not going to that resort to humiliate my daughter-in-law or make a scene or be the kind of woman who arrives somewhere to prove a point with her clothes and her jewelry and her attitude. I was going because Earl had always said I was nobody's afterthought, and I had spent 5 years since he died letting Vanessa treat me like one. I was going because my grandchildren. Brandon, who was 16 and already beginning to look at me differently because Vanessa's world was all he saw, and Amara, who was 13 and still ran to me at holidays and pressed her face into my shoulder and smelled like the baby she used to be. I was going because they deserved to see their grandmother in full. Not managed, not tolerated, whole. I packed carefully. I had not bought new clothes in a long time because I did not often have occasion for them. I went to Birmingham's Summit Shopping Center with Bet on a Saturday, and I bought what a woman going to one of the finest resorts in the Caribbean actually wears. Linen trousers in cream and sage, a silk blouse in deep coral, a swimsuit in royal blue with a matching cover-up, sandals with a low heel that I could walk the beach in, a white sundress with eyelet trim that my mother would have called church proper, and that made me look, when I put it on in the fitting room and looked in the mirror, like exactly who I was. A woman who had worked hard and loved well and was nobody's afterthought. "Dot," Bet said from outside the fitting room door. "Come out and let me see." I came out. She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes got bright. "Earl," she said quietly, to no one in particular, and she pressed her lips together and nodded. I bought the dress. I flew business class. I had never flown business class before in my life. Earl and I had always been practical travelers. We flew economy, and we didn't complain about it, and we were grateful to be going wherever we were going. But Earl was gone now, and practical had its limits, and I was 67 years old with a window seat and a wide leather chair that reclined flat and a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lemon that a young man brought me before we even pushed back from the gate. I looked out the window as Birmingham fell away below me. I thought about Earl. I thought about all the trips we had talked about taking and hadn't. The ones that were always going to happen next year, after the children were through college, after the rental properties were paid off, after things settled down. Things never quite settled down in the way we imagined they would. And then he was gone, and the trips were still on a list somewhere that he would never see. I'm going, Earl, I thought. I'm finally going. The flight to Providenciales was 4 hours with a connection in Miami. When the plane descended toward the island and I looked out the window at the water below, that impossible blue-green color, layered and luminous, like someone had taken every shade of turquoise and teal and arranged them in gradations from the shore outward. I understood, for the first time, why people talked about this place the way they did. The resort sent a car, not a shuttle, a car. A white SUV with a uniformed driver named Calvin who carried my bags with care and spoke to me with the particular warmth of someone from the island welcoming a guest he intended to make comfortable. When we arrived at the Grace Bay Club, the concierge who came to meet me at the entrance was a man named Antonio, tall, immaculate, with the graceful efficiency of someone who had spent years learning to make people feel expected and valued from the moment they arrived. "Mrs. Collins," he said, and it was not a question. "Welcome. We've been expecting you. Your suite is ready." He walked me through the property himself. I want to describe this for you because I think it matters. The Grace Bay Club is not a large resort. It is intimate and thoughtfully designed. Low white buildings arranged around gardens and pools, with the beach a constant presence beyond. The air smelled of something floral and salt clean. There were flowers everywhere. Hibiscus and bougainvillea in colors so vivid, they seemed almost unreal against the white walls. Antonio opened the door to the Ammon suite and stepped back. I walked in. The living room was larger than my bedroom at home. Floor-to-ceiling glass doors opened onto a private terrace with a plunge pool that looked directly out at the ocean. The bedroom had a king bed with white linen so crisp it seemed to hold its shape like paper. Fresh flowers on the nightstand. A fruit plate arranged with precision. Beyond the terrace, the water was that color, that impossible blue-green, glittering in the afternoon sun like it was made of something more than water. I stood on that terrace for a long time. Antonio appeared quietly at my side. "Mrs. Collins, your butler Marcus will be available to you throughout your stay for anything you need. Dinner reservations, excursions, anything at all. The beach is private access directly from your terrace. We've arranged a welcome amenity. The chef has sent over some small things. Can I get you anything else right now?" "No," I said. "This is everything. Thank you, Antonio." He nodded and withdrew, and I was alone on the terrace of the finest suite I had ever occupied in my 67 years, with the Caribbean Sea laid out before me like a gift. I sat down in one of the teak chairs. I closed my eyes, and I felt, for the first time since Earl died, completely, absolutely, unmanageably at peace. The family. Raymond, Vanessa, the children, the Whitfields, the Atlanta crowd, was arriving the following afternoon. I had one full day to myself before any of that began. I used it well. I slept 10 hours that first night. I woke to the sound of the ocean and lay still for a while, just listening to it. I ate breakfast on my terrace. Eggs and fresh fruit and coffee, so good I ordered a second cup and wrote Antonio a note telling him so. I walked the beach in the morning before the sun was fully up, when the sand was cool underfoot and the water was silver green at the edges, and I walked slowly because I had nowhere to be and no one to manage and nothing to prove. I swam in the afternoon. I read on the terrace. I had dinner at the resort's restaurant. A corner table that Antonio had arranged for me, candles, the sound of the ocean 20 feet away, a snapper preparation that I still think about when I want to remember something perfect. I went to bed that night with the terrace doors open and the ocean coming in on the night air. I thought, tomorrow they arrive. And I was ready. They arrived at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. I knew because I was at the pool. Let me describe this precisely, because the geography of it matters. The main pool at the Grace Bay Club is positioned between the main building and the beach, with the ocean visible beyond. There are loungers arranged around the pool, shaded by palms and canvas umbrellas. It is a beautiful, serene space, not crowded, not loud, just elegant and calm. I had been at the pool since 11 o'clock. I had my book. I had a glass of something cold and slightly sweet that Marcus, my butler, had arranged without being asked. He had already figured out, in 24 hours, that I liked things cold and citrus forward and without fuss. I had the royal blue swimsuit on and the matching cover-up and the coral lipstick I had bought at the summit, and I was reading a novel I had been meaning to read for 2 years and had finally reached the good part. I heard them before I saw them. Vanessa travels with a sound. There is a particular frequency to her arrivals. A combination of her voice directing, her heels on whatever surface she is crossing, and the general controlled commotion of her managing an entrance. I recognized it immediately. I did not look up from my book. I turned a page. I heard the sound of the group navigating through the resort, following a staff member toward their accommodations, passing the pool. And then the sound shifted. Voices changed register. And I felt, without looking, the precise moment when Vanessa saw me. The silence was brief but complete. Then, Raymond, her voice, very low. I turned a page. Grandma Dorothy? That was Amara. 13 years old and absolutely unmanageable in the best possible way, with her grandmother's voice coming straight out of her before her mother's hand could get to her arm. I looked up then. I smiled. Baby girl, I said. Amara broke from the group at a full run and crossed the pool deck, and I stood up in time to catch her, this tall, gangly, lovely child who still ran to me like she was 6 years old, and she wrapped her arms around my neck and said into my shoulder, "You're here! You're actually here! I'm here!" I said. I kissed the top of her head. Over her shoulder, I could see them all. Raymond, standing very still with an expression I could not quite read. Something between shock and something else, something I would understand better later. Brandon, 16, with the beginning of his father's jaw and his grandmother's eyes, who lifted one hand in a wave and almost smiled. The Whitfield party behind them. James and Lorraine and the 4 other couples, all in various states of resort arrival. Wheeled luggage, sunglasses, the particular relieved looseness of people who have just gotten off a plane and feel vacation beginning in their shoulders. And Vanessa. Vanessa was standing very still in a cream linen set that probably cost more than my first car, with her sunglasses pushed up on her head and her expression doing something extremely complicated. I met her eyes. I smiled the smile Mama had given me, the one that is completely genuine and reveals absolutely nothing. "Vanessa," I said warmly. "What a beautiful resort." She said nothing for a moment. Then, "Miss Dorothy, you. I didn't know you were." Raymond mentioned the dates, I said simply. I thought it sounded wonderful. I hope everyone had a good flight. I sat back down. I picked up my book, and that was all. I want you to feel the weight of those 30 seconds. No confrontation, no accusation, no performance of injury or triumph. Just Dorothy Mae Collins, in her royal blue swimsuit, at the pool of the finest resort in Turks and Caicos, reading her book. It was the most powerful thing I had done in years. Lorraine Whitfield sat down next to me 20 minutes later. I had not expected this. Vanessa's mother was a handsome woman of 68, the same age as my sister Bet, which I found oddly comforting, with close-cropped silver natural hair and the kind of composed, clear-eyed quality that told you she had been beautiful in her youth and had traded that beauty across the decades for something more durable. She wore a simple navy swimsuit and no jewelry except small gold hoops, and she carried a book of her own, which she set on the table between our loungers. "Do you mind?" she said. "Not at all," I said. She settled in. She opened her book. For several minutes, neither of us spoke, and it was one of the most companionable silences I had experienced in a long time. Then she said, without looking up, "My daughter didn't know you were going to be here." "No," I said. "She didn't." A pause. "But you knew she'd be here." "Yes," I said. Lorraine Whitfield turned a page of her book. "Good," she said. "Just that. Good." And we both went back to reading. And I understood in that moment that Lorraine Whitfield was a woman who saw things clearly and did not pretend otherwise, and that whatever Vanessa had told her mother about me had not landed the way Vanessa had intended. We read together for another hour. At 4:00, Marcus appeared at my elbow with a small tray. 2 glasses of something cold and mango-colored, garnished with a sprig of mint. "Compliments of the house, Mrs. Collins," he said. "And your dinner reservation this evening is confirmed for 7:30. Corner table." "Thank you, Marcus," I said. I offered the second glass to Lorraine. She accepted it with a look that acknowledged, very briefly, exactly what she understood about the situation. "Lorraine Whitfield," she said, extending her hand. "Dorothy Collins," I said. "It's very nice to meet you." By the 3rd day, the resort knew my name. Not because I asked for anything dramatic. Not because I made noise or demanded attention, but because I was present in the way that a person is present when they are fully, unhurriedly inhabiting their own life, when they are not performing for anyone and not diminishing themselves for anyone and have simply decided to be exactly who they are. Antonio greeted me by name every morning. Marcus had my coffee and fruit ready on my terrace by 7:30 without my asking. The chef sent a special preparation one evening because he had learned, through Marcus, that I had mentioned the snapper was the finest fish I'd ever tasted, and he wanted to try something new. The other guests at the resort, a mixture of international couples, anniversary travelers, a family from London with 3 small children who were perpetually sandy and joyful, moved through the property with the ease of people in a beautiful place. I moved with them. I had breakfast at the restaurant and lunch on the beach and dinners that Antonio arranged with the quiet ceremony he brought to everything. And the Collins Whitfield party watched, not obviously, not with any single person staring, but with the accumulated, sideways attention of a group that has encountered something they did not account for in their planning. Brandon found me on the beach on the second morning. He appeared from the direction of the family's accommodations and walked up the beach slowly, with the self-conscious gait of a teenage boy who wants to seem like he's going nowhere in particular. He stopped near my chair and stood for a moment looking at the water. "Hey, Grandma D," he said. "Hey, baby," I said. "Sit down if you want." He sat in the sand beside my chair. We looked at the water together for a while. Brandon had been pulling away from me in the last 2 years. I understood that it was age. It was Vanessa's world pulling at him. It was 16, being 16. But something about this place, this morning, had him sitting in the sand beside me like he used to. "This is a nice suite you have," he said. "It's beautiful," I agreed. A pause. "Mom didn't know you were going to be here." "No," I said. "Were you mad?" he asked. "About not being invited?" I thought about how to answer him honestly without giving him weight he didn't need to carry. "I was hurt," I said. "But I decided to come anyway, because your grandfather always told me I was nobody's afterthought." Brandon was quiet for a moment. "Granddad Earl," he said. "Granddad Earl," I said. He picked up a shell and turned it over in his fingers. "I miss him," he said. "Me too, baby," I said. Every single day. We stayed on the beach together for an hour. When he left, he looked back once, and something in his face had changed slightly. Something had come unclenched that I hadn't known was clenched. Lorraine and I had breakfast together on the 4th morning. Not by arrangement, we both arrived at the restaurant at 8:00, and she was alone at a table by the window, and she looked up and gestured to the chair across from her, and I sat down. We talked for 2 hours. I discovered that Lorraine Whitfield was a retired judge, that she had sat on the Fulton County Superior Court for 19 years. that she had grown up in Vine City in Atlanta, the fifth of 7 children, that her father had driven a Coca-Cola delivery truck, and her mother had cleaned houses, and she had worked her way through Spelman and Emory Law on scholarships and sheer determination. That the old Atlanta money had come later, through James, through his family's insurance business, and that she had never quite lost the part of herself that knew exactly where she had come from. She listened to me talk about Earl, about the school, about the 35 years of shaping young people in Birmingham. A principal for 23 years, she said. That is real work, Dorothy. It was the best work, I said. She looked at me steadily. My daughter, she said, and paused. My daughter has certain ideas about things, about people, about what a person's worth can be read from. She set down her coffee cup. I did not raise her to have those ideas. I want you to know that. I looked at this woman, this daughter of Vine City, this judge, this silver-haired woman in her simple gold hoops, and I felt something I had not expected to feel on this trip. Kinship. I know, I said. I can see where she got her better qualities. Lorraine's mouth curved. You are kind, she said, kinder than I might be. I've been practicing, I said. She laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere genuine. And I laughed too. And for a moment, we were just 2 women of a certain age in a beautiful place finding each other funny. And it was one of the cleanest, simplest joys of the whole trip. On the 5th evening, Antonio arranged a beach dinner. It was not something I had requested. Marcus had simply appeared that afternoon and told me that the chef was preparing a private dinner on the beach for that evening, at sunset. And would I like anything special? I said I would like whatever the chef thought was right. Marcus nodded with the small, satisfied expression of someone for whom excellence is personal. What the chef thought was right turned out to be a table set directly on the sand, 10 feet from the waterline, with candles and glass hurricanes and white linen, and a 4-course meal that began with conch ceviche and ended with a coconut dessert that should be classified as something more sacred than food. I ate alone and watched the sun go down over the ocean. The sky went pink, then orange, then a deep coral that reminded me of the blouse I had bought at the summit, then purple at the edges. Then the stars came. More stars than I had seen since Earl, and I drove out to the country one summer night decades ago and lay on a blanket in a field and looked up. Earl, I thought, you would have loved this place. I felt him there, the way I sometimes do. Not as a presence exactly, but as a quality of the air, an understanding, a warmth. I raised my glass toward the horizon. This one's for you, I said. On the 6th morning, Raymond found me on the beach. He came alone, in the early morning, before the resort woke fully. He walked down from the family's accommodations and across the sand to where I was sitting in my chair with my book unopened in my lap, watching the water. He sat down beside me in the other chair. We were quiet for a while. Raymond was 44 years old, and he looked, in that early light, more like Earl than he had ever looked to me before. The same set of the jaw, the same way of holding himself when something difficult was on his mind, contained and careful and present. Mama, he said. Raymond. A pause. The ocean moved in and out with its own long patience. I'm sorry, he said. For the phone call. For what I said. I should never have. I should have. He stopped. Started again. She asked me to make the call, and I made it, and I should have said no. I should have said no, Mama, and I didn't, and I'm sorry. I let him finish. I let the apology sit for a moment before I spoke. Baby, I said. I know. You're not angry? I thought about it honestly. I was hurt, I said. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't. But angry. No, not at you. Not really. He looked at the ocean. She was embarrassed, he said, when she saw you at the pool. She's been. He paused. She's been quiet all week. Her mother keeps. Lorraine is a wonderful woman, I said. Her mother keeps saying that you're the most impressive person at this resort, Raymond said. She said it at dinner 2 nights ago. In front of everyone. I did not say anything to that. Mama, Raymond said. His voice had changed, gone softer, to somewhere younger. Why didn't you ever tell us about what you have? The properties? The portfolio? Any of it? I didn't even know about most of it until Marcus told Brandon about the suite, and Brandon asked me, and I called Margaret. You called Margaret? I said. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. She didn't tell me details, but she confirmed that you were, that things were, that you were fine, more than fine. He looked at me. Why didn't you ever say? I thought about this for a long time. The ocean moved. A pelican crossed the horizon. Because it wasn't anyone's business, I said finally. I live the way I live because I like it. I always have. Your father and I were never trying to look like anything. We were trying to build something real. I paused. And maybe, I said, more slowly, because I wanted people in my life who were there for Dorothy, not for what Dorothy has. Raymond was quiet for a long time. She's different with you than she is with other people, he said. Vanessa, I know that. I've known it for a while and I haven't. I haven't handled it the way I should have. No, I agreed. You haven't. He looked at me. Are you going to tell me what I need to do? No, I said. You're 44 years old. You know what you need to do. The sun was getting higher now. Somewhere behind us, the resort was waking. The sound of kitchen activity, of guests beginning to move. The day was coming in. Raymond reached over and took my hand. He held it the way he used to hold it when he was small, not needing anything, just needing to be connected. We sat like that for a while, watching the ocean. Your grandmother's pearls would look beautiful on this beach, I said finally. He looked at me. I wore them to your father's funeral, I said. I'm going to wear them to dinner tonight. He squeezed my hand. You should, he said. On the last evening, I wore the white eyelet dress and the pearls. I walked to dinner at 7:30 the way I had walked to dinner every evening, unhurried, alone, comfortable in my own company. Antonio was at the entrance to the restaurant, and he greeted me with the warmth he had shown me all week, and he walked me to my corner table, and I sat down. I had been sitting for perhaps 5 minutes when Vanessa appeared at my table. She was alone. She was dressed beautifully. She was always dressed beautifully. And her expression was doing something I had not seen it do in 13 years of knowing her. It was uncertain. She was uncertain. And underneath the uncertainty was something that looked, if I was reading it right, like a genuine attempt at something she was not accustomed to. Miss Dorothy, she said, may I sit down? I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat. She set her clutch on the table and then picked it up and put it in her lap. She was not quite meeting my eyes. I owe you an apology, she said. A real one, not a managed one. I waited. What I said, what I had Raymond say, was unkind. It was more than unkind. It was wrong. She paused. I told myself I was being practical, that it was about the group dynamic, the crowd. But that was. Her voice caught slightly. That was not honest. I looked at this woman, 41 years old, beautiful, accomplished, the daughter of a judge, the mother of my grandchildren, the wife of my son. I had spent 13 years letting her manage me, and she had spent 13 years managing me because I had allowed it, because I was trying to keep the peace, because I loved Raymond and I loved those children, and I had told myself that keeping quiet was the same as keeping the family whole. It was not the same thing. Vanessa, I said, I accept your apology. She looked up. And I want to tell you something, I said, not to hurt you, because I think you need to hear it, and I think you're ready to hear it, or you wouldn't have come to this table. She nodded, just barely. I have never needed your approval, I said. I know you have believed, for most of the time I have known you, that I have, that I needed to be included by you, validated by you, seen by you. I don't. I said it without heat, without injury, the way you say something that is simply and plainly true. I am a woman who taught children for 35 years, who built a life alongside a remarkable man, who raised a son who, whatever his shortcomings, is fundamentally good and loves his family. I have a home and a life and resources and a self that exists entirely independently of whether you find me impressive. Vanessa was very still. What I do need from you, I said, is for you to be a good mother to my grandchildren and to let my son be a son to me. That is all I need from you. And in exchange, I will be exactly what I have always been, someone who loves this family and will do anything for it. She was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes were bright in a way that she was working to control. My mother likes you very much, she said finally. I like your mother very much, I said. A small sound came from her that might have been a laugh. She told me I had profoundly misjudged you. Your mother is a wise woman, I said. Vanessa looked at the table. Then she looked at me. I'd like to start over, she said. If that's possible. Not. I don't mean pretend the past didn't happen. I mean, I know what you mean, I said. Yes, I think we can do that. She stood up. She hesitated. Then she did something she had never done in 13 years. She leaned down and embraced me. Not the air kiss performance she had always offered at holidays. An actual embrace. Brief, slightly stiff with the awkwardness of unfamiliarity. But real. Good night, Miss Dorothy, she said. Good night, Vanessa, I said. Enjoy the rest of your evening. She walked back toward the family's table. Antonio appeared at my side, quiet as ever. Can I bring you anything, Mrs. Collins? Yes, I said. A glass of champagne, please, Antonio. The good one, he smiled. Of course. I flew home to Birmingham on a Sunday morning. Calvin, the driver, took me to the airport. I checked one bag and carried one small case and settled into my business class seat with a contentment that sat deep and quiet in my chest, below the level where contentment usually lives. Bet picked me up from the airport. She was waiting at the curb in her old Buick with the windows down and a takeout bag from our favorite Bessemer restaurant on the back seat because she knows that after travel, what I want is to be home and eat something that tastes like home. She looked at me for a long moment when I got in. Well, she said. Well, I said, tell me everything. I told her everything. I told her about Amara running across the pool deck. I told her about Antonio and Marcus and the beach dinner and the stars. I told her about Brandon sitting in the sand telling me he missed Earl. I told her about Lorraine and the 2 hours over breakfast and what we had talked about. I told her about Raymond's hand in mine watching the ocean. I told her about Vanessa at my dinner table on the last night. Bet drove and listened. She did not interrupt. She took the long way home, the route that goes down past the old neighborhood where we grew up, past the church where we were baptized and confirmed, and where Mama and Daddy both had their homegoing services. When she finally spoke, what she said was, Earl knew. What did he know? I said. He knew who you were, she said. He always knew. That's why he kept telling you. I looked out the window at the streets of Birmingham going past. The Bradford pear trees were blooming all over the city. White blossoms everywhere, generous and unhurried, doing exactly what they were made to do without asking anyone's permission. I know, I said. I think I finally know it too. 3 weeks after I came home, Vanessa called me. Not Raymond. Vanessa. She called to ask if I would come to Atlanta for Amara's spring recital. She said she wanted me there, she said, and I could hear the effort in it, the deliberate stretch towards something new, that she would love for me to stay the weekend, if I wanted, that they had the guest room ready. I said yes. I said yes simply and without making anything of the gesture, because that was the right thing to do. But when I hung up, I went out to the front porch and I stood next to Earl's Bradford pear tree, full of blossoms now, the white so thick it almost looked like snow. And I put my hand on the bark and I said, quietly, you were right, Earl. I was nobody's afterthought. The blossoms moved in the small wind. I went back inside and put the kettle on. Here is what I want to leave you with. I did not go to that resort to win. I am not interested in winning. Winning requires an opponent, and I did not think of Vanessa as an opponent. I thought of her as a woman who had decided she knew who I was without ever taking the time to ask. That is not unusual. People do that all the time. They look at where you come from and what you wear and how you speak, and they build a version of you that is simpler and smaller than the real thing, because the real thing is more complicated, and they don't have time for complicated. What I did was refuse to be that version. I did not go to that resort to prove my worth. Worth is not something you prove. It exists or it doesn't, and no suite or flight upgrade or beach dinner changes whether it exists. What I did was remind myself of my own. I went because Earl had told me 10,000 times across 43 years of loving me that I was nobody's afterthought. And when he died, I had stopped believing it the way I should have. I had let grief and loneliness and the accumulated weight of Vanessa's management work a kind of erosion on me. Quiet, slow, not dramatic, but real. I went to put a stop to that erosion, for myself. And I brought my good dress and my grandmother's pearls, and I sat at that corner table and ate the finest food I had ever tasted, and I was entirely, unambiguously Dorothy Mae Collins, Nobody else. Nothing less. If someone in your life has built a smaller version of you and moved into it like it's the truth, if someone has decided you wouldn't fit in somewhere, that you don't belong in certain rooms, that your presence is inconvenient or your taste is inadequate or your world is too small for their company, I want you to hear this. Book the trip, wear the dress, order the good champagne. Not to prove anything to them, to prove something to yourself. To stand somewhere beautiful and feel in your whole body the truth that you were always worth it, that you were always the kind of woman who belonged in the finest room, that their estimation of you was never the measure that mattered. The measure that mattered was Earl's. The measure that matters is yours. Take up your space, beloved, every inch of it, without apology and without explanation. You were never anybody's afterthought. This is an original fictional story created for entertainment. All characters are fictional, inspired by the quiet, unshakable dignity of real women everywhere.